Welcome to Kalamazoo's podcast. We're talking Kalamazoo people, places, events, and history. There are still plenty of stories out there waiting to be told, and that's why we're here. Your host is a former busboy at High Wheeler, fry cook at Long John Silver's, real cook at Ponderosa, and one-time weekend lackey at the Kalamazoo Gazette. He's spent over 30 years talking into the business end of a microphone, and he's recording Kalamazoo history, one project at a time. Scotty Bud Melvin.
And hello, and thanks for clicking on our little podcast today. We appreciate it. Our brand new, I shouldn't say brand new, but it's close to it anyway, podcast, Kalamazoo's podcast, and we appreciate you being there. We're going to be talking with people around the Kalamazoo area who some are still here, some are not. Today's guest is not. But
you guess who it is yet?
You'll find out why in a minute, and we'll get his story, figure out when he came and when he left and why and all that good stuff. You can find us on social media all over the place. I'm easy to find, and also at our website, scottybud.com. So today's guest was on your radio in the 80s and also the early 90s. And that's when I worked with him. He is Jerry Lord, and you may recognize his voice. Jerry, good morning.
Jerry Lord in the morning, I think I went.
That was it. Well, that was
at
least at one station.
Unless I was doing a character.
Right.
Gramps!
Let's talk about that in a minute. First, before we get to the 80s and you on the radio in Kalamazoo, how did you get to Kalamazoo and where did you come from?
Yeah. Well, my home state is Wisconsin.
Right.
Go Badgers.
Born there?
I'm not being a homer this morning, am I?
That's all right.
Badger shirt on and my Packers.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes. Born in Spring Green, Wisconsin.
Where the hell is that?
Small rural town west of Madison.
Got it.
Which most people relate to in terms of geographics.
Yep.
Madison. About 40 miles west of there. And population 1,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So very rural and small town. So my first venture into radio was not necessarily planned.
Really?
No.
So you do not have the communications degree?
I do not.
Neither
I have
do
an
I.
accounting degree.
Oh, my.
Don't you see the natural transition there?
As always, many have done it.
To disc jockey.
Sure. I can't wait to hear how that happened.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it concise. You go through your guidance counselor in high school.
Yeah.
They try to figure out what your interests are.
Right.
You fill out all kinds of forms, which I did as well. And everything pointed towards something in the creative field, theater,
Right.
music, because I spent a lot of time with those activities in
Sure.
high school as well as a lot of sports. So I was more focused on the social part of high school than the academics part.
There you go.
Didn't make my mom very happy.
Jerry talks too much.
We finally got there. So I finally decided, after everything pointed towards something creative, to take a business degree, realizing I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Sure.
You're 18 years old.
I'm with you. We had this discussion with my daughter. She's like, I just don't know. They're asking us at school what we're going to do, what we want to. I'm like, you're 17 years old. You're not supposed to know what you're going to do the rest of your life.
There's very few people who have that figured out.
I did, but I'm an idiot, so don't go by me. But, most people don't know.
Right. So once I got to college and took the few classes, I determined that I had somewhat of a skill with accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And it made sense to me because I'm not a very deep person in terms of theories and things like that. I like things to equal so that I can say, okay, I made that, that's right or wrong.
Yep.
And so accounting was certainly, that. And so I never really thought about whether I'd enjoy what I did.
Oh, okay.
At that point in my life, I just thought, well, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity there.
Sure.
Which there was.
Yeah.
So graduated with the accounting degree and took a job as an internal auditor.
Wait a minute. Where'd you graduate from?
University of Wisconsin, Platteville.
Platteville.
Southwest part of Wisconsin. there's a system within the state of Wisconsin which several schools are affiliated with the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the Big Ten school, obviously.
Yeah.
And so accreditation between the schools, credit transfers and what have you. And so I spent 4 years at Platteville. Actually got through in 4 years, which was kind of common now as opposed to the 6 to 8 year plan that we're seeing now. And got my first job as an internal auditor with a manufacturing company. It was a meat processing company. You might have heard of it, called Hormel.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wow.
I traveled around a lot, and that was cool. And got to see a lot of this country.
As an accountant with Hormel.
Right.
Wow.
So once I completed that journey, they thought, well, this guy's, making it happen. Maybe we should put him as a manager. So I was 23 years old.
Wow.
And they had me managing people who were like 30 years older than me. Wow. And I had no clue about any of that.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
I'll be darned.
So I learned really quick at a young age that management was probably not my strength. But I went forward with it, and I had 2 different management jobs within like the first 18 months. They transferred me to New Orleans, Louisiana to manage a distribution center for the company, the accounting part of it. And that was a great experience, living in New Orleans. I highly recommend anybody that hasn't been there, put it on your bucket list.
Sure.
And I got tired of that, didn't really enjoy it, and I decided, well, maybe it's just the company. So I threw the resume out there with a headhunter and finally ended up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, from New Orleans, Louisiana, back to the Midwest in another company, manufacturing company. And it was the, same stuff, different day.
Sure.
It wasn't the company, it was what I was doing that I determined it just was not where I needed to be. So I started going to night school for broadcasting because, why? Well, I listened to a lot of radio as I was growing up, in my teens and early 20s. And I had, like most people, have a favorite morning show. When I was in Minneapolis,
Sure.
there was a morning show called Hines and Berglund. A couple of guys, kind of like Bob and Tom,
Sure.
that were having a lot of fun with listeners and just the banter between the two.
Yep.
You can relate to that.
Sure.
And I thought, man, that sounds like fun. So that's how it kind of got the juices going on that. And
where were the classes?
they were at Brown Institute in Minneapolis.
Okay. Is that just broadcasting, or is that
just broadcasting at the time?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what its status is right now, and if it's developed into something beyond that. Probably has, probably into video and things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
So I continued my accounting job at day, broadcasting school at night, and that was like a 18-month process. And decided, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I think when I left my accounting job, I was making $26,000, rough number. That was, keep in mind, that's not a lot of money today.
Right.
Back in 1980,
Yep.
that was pretty good dough.
Mm-hmm.
And my first, so Brown had a placement director,
Right.
and they would try and place you with a radio station. So they found me an opportunity at a country music station in Waterloo, Iowa. And when I was going through broadcast school, I always said to myself, there are three things that I will never, ever do.
Uh-oh.
Number one is live in Iowa. Number two, never play country music.
Right.
And number three, I will never do hog and grain reports.
Oh, my God.
So guess what?
No. All of
three.
them.
All three. However, that
For less
aside,
money, by the way. I'm
Oh,
sure. Probably half.
12 grand.
There it is.
Yeah.
Half. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So the bottom line to that was I was really enjoying what I was doing.
Sure.
And I particularly enjoyed the production side of it.
Oh, yeah.
Different sound effects mixed in with the voice, altering the voice,
Yep.
character voices.
Yep.
And through that first job, which was a great starting point, even though I despised all those things I just mentioned,
Yeah.
it was a solid company, great learning environment, great people. And I saw it as a stepping stone, like you do most things. And I had visions of getting to a major market at some point, like the Heinz in Bergland I referenced, or Bob and Tom,
Yeah.
and do something like that. And I guess if I have a regret about my broadcast career, that would be it, that I never pursued it to that degree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I spent 18 months in Waterloo, Iowa, got married during that time,
Oh,
and then it was time to move on.
sure. That's about right.
And so I went from country music and got my second radio job at WKFR Radio 103.3
Yep.
in 1984.
84. And it was in Battle Creek at the time,
Yes, in
that right?
the bank building, as they
downtown.
called it, downtown,
Yep.
right across from McCamley Square, to give you a reference. For
How
those
hard
who-
was it to get that gig? Did a guy help you? Did you make a phone call? Send out tape and resume?
Send out tape and resumes. And
Yeah.
back then, there was no digital.
Right.
And so it was cassettes and reel.
Yeah.
A lot of postage, weight,
Yeah.
mailing those things out, and
Yep.
a lot of time.
Yeah.
And probably sent out, 40 to 50
Wow.
at that time.
That's a good chunk.
Yeah. And I had Michigan as a target state
Oh,
because
okay.
that's where my then wife, I'm no longer married, but at that time her family lived in Michigan in the Detroit area. And so Saginaw, Lansing, Grand Rapids,
Yep.
Detroit, and floated in Kalamazoo. And I don't know if it still exists, but there was it Radio and Records?
Right. R&R.
Is that still?
I think
in
it
there?
is, but I don't think it's a magazine as much as it is a digital thing online
Yeah, it was
now.
Trade Magazine.
And I don't pay attention to it that much anymore, to be honest with you. It doesn't affect me, but it was the Bible of the business.
And I saw the job for
Yeah.
WKFR
There you go.
morning show. And by the way, I started off in afternoons when I started at the country station. And within the first 6 months, they asked me if I'd like to do mornings.
Oh, there you go. That didn't take long.
Yeah. And so I applied for the job at WKFR, got a phone call. We'd like to hire you. No interview,
Really?
over the phone.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I wasn't used to that because in the business field, you go in for an interview.
Sure.
And I thought that was kind of odd at the time just
Yeah.
because I wasn't used to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how common that was back in the day or even is now. Depends upon, because I'm in Iowa and this is Michigan.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're going to fly you, at least at that point,
Yeah.
to that size market
Yeah.
or pay your expenses. So,
Seems like most places, I think, bring you in, get a feel. I'm saying 90%
yeah.
at least.
Well,
Good for you.
so it was I was a little skeptical about the process, but there were lots of positives. It was in Michigan,
Sure.
which is the market or the state that I wanted to be for family reasons. It was not country. It was, back then we called it CHR, Current Hit Radio, and Top 40.
Top 40.
Right. And Rick Dees was big back then.
Sure.
And I used to listen to Rick Dees.
Yep.
And I liked his characters and all the alter egos that he, developed.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And so I started, when I got to Kalamazoo in September or at the time Battle Creek, September of 84, I started the morning show and started to develop a cast of characters. I did a Reagan voice,
Oh, yeah.
and I developed a traffic report, which was kind of a joke.
Yeah, right.
Not kind of, it is a joke, but did a traffic report with a helicopter sound in the
course,
background.
Of course.
And the Reagan voice. So it was Reagan on traffic.
Wow.
And I would mess with people, and, Reagan would mess with people.
Right, of course.
Lie through his teeth about what was going on the roads, and I'd have to correct him. So that was one. And then this wouldn't be politically correct in today's environment, but I developed what I called at the time a dirty old man character,
Oh, yeah.
Gramps.
Right.
Yeah, this is Gramps.
I think he might be able to get away with it.
And Gramps was the vehicle to tell jokes.
Right. That you couldn't
that I
tell.
couldn't.
Dirty jokes,
Right.
off-color stuff.
Right. And I would interact with Gramps.
Yeah.
And for those of us that spent time in radio, there's different ways of doing that, but back then we didn't have digital. And I would record Gramps' voice many times on a tape cartridge
Yep.
where you could start and stop it. And so I'd push the button, Gramps would speak, and then I'd step over the end of his so
Yep.
it sounded like he was in the studio.
Perfect.
And it gained what I was hoping to, this alter ego. And when I'd go out to remotes,
yeah.
people would ask, how's Gramps doing? Where is he? Is he ever going to come out to remote? And I found that to be just fascinating.
Yeah.
And so the whole theater thing was coming back.
Sure.
'Cause I played a lot of different characters in theater, in high school and in college, and different personas. So it kind of came natural to me to act that, but it was even more fun because it was theater of the mind,
Sure.
as we call it.
Which was big back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not so much anymore.
Right.
But yeah.
And that was the day of, quick pace, play the music,
Yep.
have a little fun in and out, and don't stop down too much because people are really tuning in to hear the music.
Sure.
And so that blend of the music, which I really liked, those were the days of Hall & Oates
Yep.
and Michael Jackson
Sure.
and Phil Collins. And, the amazing thing that I find is that I still see the Stones, the Who, Bob Dylan, and Hall & Oates making money at casinos.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm sure they, whenever I hear them interviewed now, they never envisioned that they'd still be. But that's still my favorite decade of music was the 80s.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah.
The young kids don't get it.
Right.
They're like, wow, that was lame.
Yeah.
Like, no, well, you didn't live it.
Yeah. So I'm still very fond of the 80s music, and with Pandora and the other free services, you can play anything you want through
Right.
your cell phone. And that even today is where I listen to most of my music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have my iPod. I refuse as an old. I'm stubborn and old school,
Right?
as you kind of are as well.
Yeah.
But I refuse to give money to anybody
Yeah.
to play music.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I just have my iPod. That's the only Apple thing I own.
Yeah.
So I'll put all my favorite stuff on there.
Uh-huh.
Listen to. I don't even listen to a lot of radio anymore, to be honest with
I
you.
do not either.
And so
AM mostly for me.
whatever. Yeah, I'll do that.
Talk radio.
I'll listen to some talk radio, maybe a little sports radio, which
Mm-hmm.
to me, sports radio is horrible these days. It's just sometimes I can't even listen to it.
Yeah.
But my iPod in the car, I got everything I like.
Yeah.
What more do you need?
Exactly. And then I developed also a character called Dear Krabby.
Yes.
Take off on Dear Abby.
Yep.
And Dear Krabby would give sarcastic advice
Right.
to what I made listeners believe, hopefully, were letters that people
Right.
wrote into Dear Krabby.
And people believed that they were.
Yes.
We did the same thing,
Yeah,
as did every morning show.
sure.
You could make up a letter, and this is what we did. And people would think, wow, some dude wrote in to ask about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's a bit.
Yep. Yeah. And then
So
as-
Dear Krabby was a woman that you
She
did?
was.
Yeah. Dear Krabby. Okay, so you just jacked up the voice a little.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it went into a higher register
Sure,
and
sure.
got a little testy and,
Did you
grouchy.
make them local?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
because, that was a big thing,
Right,
too.
right.
Still is.
Right. And a lot of times I'd just go to the, columns in the newspaper.
Sure.
And just alter them to make them fit.
Yeah.
And people would come up to me and say, gee, that was very similar to an article I just read in the paper the other day. I said, isn't that amazing?
That is something else. That is
All right, so
theater of the mind.
From my own development of characters, I started doing more listener involvement,
There you go.
which became and still is very popular
Yeah.
on morning shows.
And necessary.
Talk shows, obviously.
Yeah.
It's the norm now.
Yeah.
And it's a different style now. But
Yeah.
but that, I did different games I played with them. I do topics sometimes, as many people do,
Sure.
when people, particularly local stuff that people were riled up about.
Yes. Those I found were the best.
Yeah.
Because that's what people talk about around the water cooler.
Exactly.
And that's what we always
Yeah.
tried to be, was a water cooler type vehicle.
And then
So,
as time went on, there were services available, meaning in the industry, that would provide pre-recorded material that you could interact with to make it sound local in your market.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of that service that I used, but
Yeah.
really
There were a
doesn't
few, handful, good
matter.
ones,
Yeah. So, the radio station, WKFR, the ownership started to do what a lot of radio owners are doing now, and they started to gobble up other properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so the owner of the station at that time bought WKMI, which is a legend, of course, in radio
Sure.
in Kalamazoo.
Yep.
Back with the days of, what is it, Holiday and King?
Mm-hmm.
Was that in the 70s?
Yeah, 80s,
70s?
early 80s.
Yeah.
Dave Thompson was big.
Yep.
He was my guy.
Bill Anthony was.
Yeah, Bill, friend of ours.
So when that happened, Bill Anthony became the program director then of WKFR, and he brought in one of his former. I guess they worked together back in the day. Did Dave or Phil Britton?
Mm-hmm.
Was he part of KMI at one time?
I believe so. I'm pretty
so.
sure we'll probably have to get with him and get the exact dates. I'm fuzzy on some of those dates in the 70s,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Phil had been to some markets where, like I think it was Hartford, Connecticut,
Yep.
and had done pretty well there. And I thought, and still think, that Phil is a genius when it comes to production. I learned so much from him, from a when I say production, for those who are not in the industry, doing promos on and putting sound effects in them and making them sound really slick and hot and upbeat, and for a cash giveaway or whatever
Sure.
the promotion was at the time, so that you wanted listeners to tune in.
Yeah.
at a certain
And get excited about what the heck you're doing.
Yeah. So
And he was a hard worker when it came to that stuff.
He was,
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw
very,
that.
Yeah, very serious about it, and as far as the way it sounded, and I really respected that and learned a lot from him. So
That's pre-digital.
yeah,
Because
pre-digital.
so it was extra work.
Yeah, so a lot of splicing and cutting up tape,
Literally.
which again, if you're not in the industry, you wouldn't appreciate it like Scotty Bud and I.
Yeah, we literally cut tape with a razor blade.
That's right.
How about that?
Yeah, yeah. People are like, what?
And it took 10 times longer than it does now.
Right.
Now it's clickety-click and you're done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many frustrating hours did we spend in a studio recording a 30-second commercial?
Sweating to death. And
Right.
do you remember other than him, do you remember the lineup for the most part?
I do.
Late 80s?
Phil brought in a couple of people he worked with in the Hartford, Connecticut area, I believe. People probably will remember, if you were around at that time, Jerry Belletta,
Yep.
who did the evenings like 6 to midnight or whatever it was at the time. And then overnights was Andy Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dave Benson was there before. Dave came from Rockford, Illinois.
Yeah.
And Dave's still there today, which just amazes me.
It is. He's going to die in that chair.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably 86 that he started at WKFR,
Yep.
and it's 2017. and he's still doing afternoons,
Right.
same slot, ever since 1984, right? I don't think
Yeah.
he ever veered
I
from
don't
that time slot.
think so. They may have tweaked the hours a little
Right.
here and there when people come and go, but
Right.
yeah,
And,
it is amazing.
You know, I think from a listener standpoint, they like consistency
Sure.
to some degree.
Well, he's
So-
been the only one.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as far as that goes.
So I think it's amazing that anybody
Oh, I
stays
agree.
on radio that long. And so it was myself in the morning, and then Phil came on after me.
Mhm.
This is Phil Britton, Splitting, if you remember that,
Yep.
when he'd sign off every day. And then it was Benson in the afternoon,
Mhm.
and then Jerry Belletta, and then Andy Miller overnight. So that was a pretty cohesive unit for about 2 years.
So,
And, KFR was unique at the time. And probably some would say in the industry that it still is, from the standpoint of it dominates,
right.
in terms of what they do. And, I always like to think that when we had that group, we did it really, really well. It already had, a lot of listeners,
Mhm.
but I think it really started to crank up when we got that group together, and that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun. It was a fun group to be with, and like any job, it's not just the job; it's the people you work with.
Sure.
And
Especially in radio.
yeah,
You're out doing a lot of stuff.
right,
Weekends,
right.
Friday nights.
It's a family,
Sure.
you know.
And it was back then.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah,
And
because
because
the closer you are as a group,
the more
not
you're going
just
to be
the people on your show,
right.
but just the continuity of
You can tell.
Yeah, the energy.
Yeah. Listeners can tell.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
back then, stations were more promotional, more active, more out in the community, as opposed to now. It's a little less than back then,
Right. Yeah.
And also, one of the things about 103 was back then, there wasn't a lot of competition as well. Not to
Yeah.
diminish
Right.
what you guys did.
No, you're absolutely right. I was going to make that point.
but there weren't 25 stations.
Right. Exactly.
And this was the only top 40 station.
Yep.
Boom.
With a great signal.
So you guys had monster ratings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were huge before I even got there, so I'm not trying to
Right.
credit for, but I do believe that the continuity of that group
Sure.
intensified those
Sure.
ratings, and it was a great time in radio for me, and probably all those guys would say that.
Oh, yeah.
And I still see Phil and golf with him,
Mhm.
So as the radio dial became more diversified in the late 80s,
Mm-hmm.
new formats, B93 being one of them, the country station.
With one of the biggest signals in America.
Right.
People may not know that, but they have a grandfathered situation
Right.
where 200,000 or 250,000 watts,
50, I believe.
and normal stations are 40,000
Right.
or 50,000.
Right.
And so do the math on that.
Yeah.
So that's why they pull a
Yeah.
lot of listeners.
And
so yeah,
that was the time when country music started making a real changeover as far as the sound of country music.
Got a little
And
hipper.
rock.
yeah,
That was the beginning of it in my
Yeah.
recollection.
Sure.
Would you agree with that?
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so, along with that, at the same time, they hit the air before WRKR did. So
Yeah.
WRKR 107.7, you and I both have a history there.
yep. I try not to say the call letters too often in the house.
Right.
It puts a bad vibe out.
I got you.
Still the evil empire to
I
me.
got you. Well,
But you transitioned, and
Yeah.
you're getting to it.
1988.
88 was a big year for you and for me because I went as well.
Right.
I want to know how you went from 103,
Yeah.
very successful, probably happy, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden,
Yeah. Very comfortable.
very comfortable. You were
Yeah.
probably making decent money, and all of a sudden, it changed.
Yeah.
How did it change?
So-
I don't know that I've ever talked to you about this.
Yeah. So, what would I have been at the time? Probably about 28, 28 years old. And so that's 1988. And
Probably
I was-
summer.
I was still trying to, in the back of my mind, make strides up the ladder different formats, different opportunities to get to the major market.
Ah, okay.
So could I have done that possibly just staying with KFR? Probably.
Yeah.
But I just saw this as a new opportunity. There was some media about the station, and when you're in an industry, you hear things. And so they were hiring, starting the station. Took them a while to get there, as you and I both know,
Right.
from a legal standpoint,
Sure.
and licensing and what have you.
Yeah.
And so in 1988, probably 3 months before, I believe it was October 1st that we started.
Yeah.
That station.
Actually, I think it was hang on. I think it was the 18th.
Was it?
Yeah. I still have a thing on it that has the date.
Well,
So 10/18/88. That's why I remember
yeah.
it.
Oh, all right. And so the transition was, I'm going to give this, I'm going to see what's going on over there. And so I called, said, Jerry Lord, yeah, we know who you are. And Ed Sackley
Yep.
was the person I talked to, who was the initial general manager and part owner.
Mhm.
And went over to meet with him. And then after that, he had me meet with the program director at the time, Bill Martin. And Bill has passed on since.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah. And so Bill was in the mix as one of the original members of that staff
Yep.
at WRKR. And so interviewed with him, and he and Ed said, let's do this. And so I was hired. And so I made that transition.
How did they take it at KFR?
Not well.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
not well.
And who was in charge over there then?
That was Dave Hicks.
He was the general manager
and owner.
and the owner. That's
Yes.
right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And this was shortly after we had moved from Battle Creek to
Right.
Jennings Drive, where RKR and KFR and KMI are still today, right?
Right. But they moved there because KMI was there at the time.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
Correct. And so, how do I put this delicately? I was told to come to the door, and your things would be in a box.
Oh, it was that way.
Yeah.
You didn't even get to get back in.
No.
So you didn't go inside and tell them. They knew somehow
no,
while you were
I told
away.
Bill Britton at the Gull Road Tavern.
Oh, just up the street.
I told him to meet me after his show,
Oh, okay. So
whatever
yeah.
day it was.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. And so he sent word back.
yeah. So word got back to Dave
Sure.
Hicks and
Not allowed in the building.
right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Here's your shit
Right.
in a box.
Pretty much.
You probably had a lot of stuff though. I'm guessing
I
at
didn't
that.
get it all back. I
Oh,
had to
of course
have some
not.
Stealth people.
Yeah,
get
there
it
you
to
go.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough said.
I couldn't come in and say goodbye to anybody.
Oh, see, that sucks.
Yeah.
That's.
But that's.
But you did kind of stick it to him,
Yeah. No question.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was no 2-week situation.
No.
There was. I'm giving my
I
2
was
weeks.
done.
Yeah,
I
radio
was
people
done.
just disappear
Well-
and no one talks about them.
Professionally, I did say this is my 2-week notice, but I was off the air the next day.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not sure who filled in at that point until they hired.
Probably Phil.
Was it John Dial that took over?
Oh, yeah, he took over eventually.
yeah. I can't even remember who did the morning show.
I'll be darned.
Benson.
That wasn't. You didn't care.
No. So that's how the journey started with RKR.
Yeah.
That was a very exciting time, as it probably was for you.
Sure. I was for those who don't know, in 1988, I was one of 2 or 3 part-timers
Right.
who was hired in. I was terrible. I was just in the business 2 years,
Yeah.
and I was lucky to get in as a part-timer.
Well, see, the difference, big difference between me and you, but probably a lot of people in radio, is that you're a real music historian.
Sure.
And I was not that. And so I found in a hurry that people who listen to classic rock,
Oh, yeah.
which was the format we debuted,
Yeah.
the Stones, the Who, the Beatles, Bob Seger,
Yep.
that they were passionate
Right.
about the artists.
Good point.
They were well read. those songs meant something to them, as they do to any genre of music.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
I had to learn a lot, actually.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff I didn't know about. I was a metalhead, you know,
Yeah.
for the most part. I mean, I knew some stuff about Seeger and, you know, The Who and that. But I bought the big book
Yeah.
of encyclopedia, whatever the hell it was called.
I had the same.
And I would sit there on the overnights and learn about CCR.
Right.
I didn't know who these people were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
People did know. Because people would call, I'd go, hey, that's CCR, and that's that John Fogerty, and
Yeah.
and someone would call and go, actually, it was John Fogerty and his cousin who
Right.
started the band in
Exactly.
1949, and they would school you.
They didn't hesitate to correct
No.
you.
Well, that's what people like to do to the
Yeah.
radio guys.
Yeah.
Correct you. But you're right. They were passionate about that.
Yeah. So, I guess as I look back on it, I really didn't think about that part of it. Even though I remember Bill Martin telling me, and even in my interview, he asked me some questions like that.
Music stuff.
Yeah. Like he asked me who Blind Faith was.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
who were the members of Blind
See,
Faith.
that's stuff I had to learn as
Luckily,
well.
I knew, was it Steve Winwood?
I think
Was he in
so.
Blind Faith?
Yeah. I impressed him when I knew who Bonnie Bramlett was. I had learned who Bonnie Bramlett was, who sang with Eric Clapton and
Yeah.
all these other, and had slept with half of the rock world. And I think that's what got me in. But you're right. You know, people
Because
who listen knew.
You know, Bill was a seasoned
Oh, for sure.
veteran in the radio business.
That's right.
and
Including
it was his-
WKMI. He
yeah,
had
it
done a
was
stint there.
his heritage
Yeah,
and life, and which is a great thing.
sure.
He was very passionate about
Yep.
this station, RKR.
Well, it's fun to be part of a startup,
Yeah, it was fun.
you know, and
the
he was
whole-
from here. So
I remember well
double.
the whole promotion, the billboard campaign that was just really
Billboards with lyrics, I believe.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
old time rock and
Teasers.
roll,
yeah,
stuff
exactly.
like that. Yep. Little
Yeah.
teasers.
And it was a great rollout.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of anticipation and excitement.
Yep.
Wouldn't you agree?
For
By
sure.
by the market, the
For sure.
listeners.
Because there was no rock station.
Right.
There was the station that I worked at first, WLKM in Three Rivers,
Yeah.
that played rock at night. But you couldn't get it on the north side of Kalamazoo.
Right.
So once you got to Stadium Drive or whatever,
The
the
signal, you mean.
signal went out. Yeah.
Couldn't reach that far.
Couldn't hear it. And then some nights, WLAV in Grand Rapids would come in good. Some nights it wouldn't.
Yeah.
That was the other rock station. So there really was not, and obviously Ed and his folks
Yeah.
figured that out
Yeah.
and said, this is where we need to be.
Yeah.
And that was their brilliance.
So the other vivid memory that I have, just from a personal standpoint, is that I felt like the shtick that I did at KFR. When I say shtick, the characters,
Sure. The jokes.
the jokes,
Not
just
going to
didn't
cut it.
fit that audience. At least I didn't know how to make it fit, and I was trying to force some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so
So you came with the same show,
tried to
to bring it into first however long.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, this is gonna be
And
great.
It just didn't feel like
Yeah.
it was being accepted by that audience.
Different
Same
audience.
market,
Different
but
audience.
definitely a different listener, an
So-
older listener.
So you go from 103,
Right.
12-year-old girls, soccer moms, for the most part,
Heavy female audience.
big female audience.
Right.
This is almost the opposite.
Exactly.
This is
Mostly
45-year-old men,
male. Yeah.
guys who drive Harleys,
Yeah.
people who like The Who.
They don't want the talk.
No.
They want the music.
They don't wanna
and They want you
hear-
to know about the music.
Yeah, they don't want to hear aha.
And they want to hear about sports.
Yep,
Exactly.
for sure.
And
So you figured out they didn't. Did you figure that out?
well, had reviews after the show,
Sure,
listened
you
to
talk
tapes
about
with
it.
Bill Martin, and we talked a lot about that. And so we tried to tweak it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just never comfortable, I guess, because of my lack of, at the time, knowledge of that whole genre of music in
Yeah.
terms of really understanding that listener passion.
Yeah.
And so, I listened to Alice Cooper at night. Is that what his show is called?
Right,
On the
Nights with
on the
Alice.
Zoo now.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of passion and knowledge that, he's over the top.
Yeah, he can't.
Right. So everybody
It's hard to
in
beat
our
him.
industry probably wish they knew a thimble full of what he knows.
Plus, he's already a rock star.
Yeah,
As it is.
exactly.
So, yeah.
So that's the ultimate. And I was way, way, way below that.
Yeah.
And so I felt it was fun, but I felt out of my environment to a degree as far as the format, even though I love the music.
Sure.
And I love classic rock and still have many CDs that I listen to in the car when I listen to a record. Yeah, there were records back in the day.
Yep.
And so in 1990, we mutually decided that, this just wasn't comfortable for me anymore, and maybe not for the listeners. And I had a young child at the time, and, back in the day of the 80s, there wasn't huge money in radio being a broadcaster.
No.
That's changed to a great degree, even in a market like
Kalamazoo
now, comparatively, most things.
Correct.
And I felt I needed to have a boost in income, and I felt that maybe sales was an opportunity to increase that income, but still stay in the business.
Sure.
So I transitioned in 1990 from morning disc jockey for the past 10 years on different radio stations to almost 10 years to became a member of the WRKR sales crew, team, staff. And I spent a few years with RKR.
Yep.
And then I moved on to Adams Outdoor Advertising, the billboard company, and spent 10, 11 years there. And then went to work for Channel 3 for a little stint. And I spent some time in another sales field out of media. And so that's kind of my history in terms of the years. So get into the 2000s now. So in 2008 is when I left Channel 3, and I was in sales there, WWMT, and kind of wandered around a little bit trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I was, in 2008, I'm 60 now, and it's almost 2018. Well, I'm 61, actually. So it's 10 years ago, and I'm 51 years old. It gets a little more difficult to find somebody that wants to hire a 51-year-old salesperson.
Yep.
And I get that. Got it at the time. It was frustrating. So fast forward a little bit after a couple of different experiences that I won't even talk about. It was all a learning experience. I look back on my broadcasting career, my accounting career, and my sales career, that it all came full circle for me, and I got back to the opportunity now, which I'm still doing, to do what I love most about my time in radio, and that was, I certainly like doing the on-air and the characters and what have you, but even more than that, my passion was the making the commercials, adding the sound effects, the music, blending it all down to make it sound really, hopefully good. And I said, man, if I could do this for a living, wouldn't that be great? And so as far back as KFR in the mid-'80s, I started doing some work outside the station for studios. Because back then, if you had a commercial that you wanted to be produced, you didn't have digital. You went to a production house, a physical brick and mortar. And Jim Cummings, who still owns Soundstage One, was big into that and was a major player back in the 80s of producing broadcast commercials and for clients and agencies. And so I got my first demo tape for doing, production in that type of environment. Jim helped me put together. And I still do work for Jim. So that transition, how did I get to where I am? And I haven't really defined where I am, but a lot of people listening to this won't even understand it, because whenever people now ask me what I do, they go, look at me like, what? What is that? So what is it that I'm doing now? I'm through the luxury of the internet and digital technology. I'm able to contract my services, my voice, to not only places in the state, in the country, but in the world, because of the ability to do that.
Yep.
And do work for several entities throughout the world. And you know about it because you're doing some of that as well.
Yep.
And there are many people doing that now. And unless you're in the industry, you wouldn't know that or talk to somebody like me or you.
Sure.
And so...
officially called voiceover talent.
Voiceover, yeah.
Yeah.
Voiceover talent,
Yeah.
right. Or voiceover artist,
Yep.
whatever you want to call it.
Actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so...
and you have some of that in you from the good
exactly,
old days.
right.
So there you
but
go.
not only do you need, because you're kind of your own business, at least I am.
Right.
I don't work for anybody. I don't have a boss. I contract my services to whoever wants to use my voice talent.
Yep.
You know? So you need business skills,
Yeah.
which I got through the accounting.
For sure.
Because you have to do billing, you have to do collections, you have to keep track of all that stuff. And so that came pretty easily for me.
Sure.
I knew how to do spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. And you need to do marketing to get
Lots.
yourself out there and how to go about that.
That's one of the things people overlook sometimes, not only in the voiceover business, but
Yeah.
in any business.
Yeah.
You know.
So in, I believe it was 2000, I'm going to say 11.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was 2012.
I got a call from a former colleague of mine, Arlene Tanis, who I worked with back in the 80s at WKFR when I first came to the market. And she said, "What are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, not a whole lot." She goes, "Well, we're having a meeting, the initial meeting of the Southwest Michigan Voiceover Club." And I had no idea what that was or what it meant
Right.
at the time, but she kind of told me a little bit about what her insight was on it, and it was that we've got people who may have worked with in the past, people you don't even know that are doing this at some level, and they're doing it right out of their homes, and they didn't have to build a studio. And I said, I'll be at the meeting.
There you go.
I was intrigued because I had never done digital.
Oh, yeah.
Radio.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah,
When
that's
I
right.
left the airwaves, it was still tape, reel-to-reel,
reels.
cassettes, and cartridges.
And you had never farted around with it, never
No.
messed with it, never
No.
experimented, and nothing.
So I had to get up to speed on that,
Yeah.
which, like anything, you do it for a little bit and
Sure.
you talk to people, you learn it.
There's lots of help on the internet, too.
There is. Yeah. That's a great, the internet's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I mean,
And
YouTube can save your life,
Yeah, exactly.
literally.
Yeah. So since 2011, and now it's almost 2018, I've been doing voiceover work out of my home or apartment, whatever the case may be, full time. And I spent, under $1,000 probably to get into the business to buy equipment,
Right.
computers and software and hardware, microphones, so on and so forth. And I have real no overhead because I don't have to travel. I can just go in my studio, which is in my apartment that I had a walk-in closet, which is in our industry pretty common. You don't
Yeah.
have to, build a studio unless you want to in your home. And people send me work. I send it back on a digital file, and they deposit money in my bank account. It's a beautiful thing.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And the irony is, you're not even really doing the big production stuff that you loved doing.
Exactly.
You're just doing the voice.
Right.
You are. I don't
Right.
think you ever put anything together, right? Yeah.
I do not.
I don't think
Only
I have
for a
either.
demo.
Right.
A
Yeah.
demo meaning is like a audio resume for those of you not in the industry.
Yeah.
So like when I was interviewing for jobs in radio, you'd put a tape together of your show, right?
Yep.
And this is what the guy sounds like.
There it is.
Same thing today. It's just a different
Yeah.
product, a little more hybrid, and it's digital, so that you can put it on your website and people can listen to it.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I'll hire him.
Click.
And then you get on other websites on a talent roster, and those that are looking for voiceover for their business or whatever it might be can go to these various sites and listen to anybody they want to that's on that talent roster.
Yeah.
I may be oversimplifying it, but, for those not in the business, and believe me, there are a lot of people doing this that have no broadcast experience whatsoever.
Sometimes that's good.
Yes.
I had to learn some things about.
Right, because you get into a certain
it's different
mode of broadcasting, and that's not really, it still exists in terms of some advertisers, car dealerships, still like that
Screamer.
jock screaming in some cases, not always.
And you're good at those.
That's my bread and butter.
That's your wheelhouse right there.
Yeah. And so now, beyond commercials, I do narrations for industrial films, for e-learning, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's teaching somebody how to do something, podcasts, like we're doing here. And the last 3 years, I've spent the month of February in Arizona. And you go, well, how can you walk away from your job for a whole month, your income? Well, I don't. Because of the technology now and how good it is, and a little soundproofing with some pillows, you can make any room, hotel room, closet, wherever you're staying, bedroom, acoustically right to make it, good enough to sell.
Sure.
And so I work wherever I travel to if I want to and make money.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think
no overhead.
All voiceover people probably do
and
that
then when
full
you
time.
travel, if you're doing work, there are business expenses which are, legitimately deductible.
That's true.
As long as you, like with anything in a business, keep the receipts.
I think when you started doing that, when she called you to get in on that, this is really weird that this happened. I called our mutual friend, Anthony.
Yep.
We should probably mention Anthony Gettig, who has mentored and helped both of us in the voiceover industry.
Right.
At the same time you were getting that call from her, I was getting interested in voiceover, and I emailed Arlene and Anthony.
Yeah.
So I missed like the first 2 or 3 meetings that you guys had.
Yeah.
I want to say 2 or 3.
Sounds right.
But it's weird that it happened about the same time. So it's 2011, and I think I officially started my business in 2012.
Yeah.
And so, a lot to learn. Anthony helped us out. I think we're going to chit-chat with him at some point on this podcast. I mean, I think he's the most successful Kalamazoo voiceover talent. I'm pretty sure.
Absolutely.
I don't know that there's anyone around that beats him.
And he's drawing on his background too, not only broadcasting, but he's very savvy with technology.
Yes, very.
And
thank God.
Can speak the speak of the geek speak.
That's right.
Right?
Bingo.
And if you don't have some knowledge of that, or somebody you can go to help you with that, that can be a challenge to get into this industry.
True. You do have to have a little something. And people always forget about the business part too.
Right. Right.
Just like any other business, you got your landscapers, your electricians. Mm-hmm. Sure, they can fix your lamp and your lights, but are they any good at the business part of it?
Right.
And a lot are not, and that's why they will fail.
Yeah. If you're getting into any business, obviously, if you're not making enough money to cover your expenses and then also live on for disposable income, you're not going to succeed.
No, it's a hobby.
Right.
At that point.
So there are a lot of people, as you and I know, in this industry, this voiceover industry, at different levels. Mm-hmm. Some, as we know, making $200,000-$300,000 a year.
Yep.
Which is not a bad income. And others may be doing $15,000, $25,000. And depending upon what you need, you have to be successful on an ongoing basis to keep it going.
Yeah.
You have to be motivated.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, as you can attest to do it part-time and spend the amount of time to it. That's another advantage that I have. That's my sole source of income, and I can, schedule my day any way I want. I don't have to go to another job at this point in my life. This is my job.
Yeah.
And there are days when I don't do any work, but there are days like right now I'm recording an audiobook about baseball. And, it's a 35-chapter book.
Wow.
And you go, well, how long does that take? Well, I've been working on it for about a week and a half, and I do 3 or 4 chapters a day, and each chapter, depending upon the length of it, can take me 20 minutes to 40 minutes to record.
Sure.
And then after that, you've got to go back and edit out all your mistakes and put it together. So the finished product sounds like, wow, you sat down and recorded that all at once? No, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Not the way it works.
Well, a lot of people may think you just sit down and read the book.
Right.
But you can't read an entire book out loud without mistake.
Right.
You can't read a sentence without a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure at some point.
And the thing that continues to amaze me is how much work in our industry, how much is available out there.
Sure.
And the different types that I've been exposed to through going through the growth of this, my business. And, the thing you don't even think of, like you get in on an elevator and like, let's say in a department store, this is probably more common back in the 80s and 90s maybe, but maybe not so much today. The voice comes on the elevator. You get to floor 2. Cosmetics.
Yeah.
Lingerie. Somebody had to voice that.
That's right.
And that can be. And then I've done announcements recorded for commercials or some type of announcements for stadiums, like football stadiums.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So
wow.
that they put it on the Jumbotron.
Yep.
So my voice is heard by everybody in the stadium.
And just so people know, you also voice national commercials.
Right.
And I've heard many of your commercials on TV for the ice fishing shanty or whatever the hell it was, the four-wheeler. And,
Right.
And so it's not just, Joe's Bakery.
Right, exactly.
Downtown.
And again, that gets back to, I'm connected with a brick and mortar studio in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I did a 3-way connection through Skype, while the client who has this project that I voiced, it was for green tea, and it was a Asian market that was going to be listening to it, and I had to do a little bit of tweaking of my voice to get what they wanted.
Wow.
But so just imagine this guy's sitting in Asia somewhere, the client.
Yep.
The producer, the guy that I'm affiliated with,
he's recording.
He's recording in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yeah.
And I'm on the microphone in my apartment in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I live now. I'll get to that. And because of the technology, it sounds like you're in the studio.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
So it's not just like it used to be back in the day when I was doing stuff with Jim Cummings, where I'd run, after I get done with my show, I'd go to Grand Rapids or I'd go to Jim's studio.
Yeah.
I used to cut Meyer commercials.
Oh, yeah.
I'd get off the air
Yep.
at KFR, and I'd go to Grand Rapids, hop in my car, and Steele Productions, Rick Steele was big back then too. And I'd knock out 2 or 3 radio commercials for Meyer, and did that a couple times a week.
Yeah.
That was awesome. So yeah, the technology now, it just blows my mind. And your phone, and you can do everything. I mean, like Anthony and I have talked about, I've recorded commercials in my car before. Anthony's recorded commercials on his iPhone.
Yeah.
The quality with the technology,
I know,
is on.
It's amazing. It really is amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I lived in Michigan from 1984, first in Battle Creek, and then made the move when the radio station moved from KFR back in 87, I believe it was, or 86, and then lived in Kalamazoo up until August of 2016, and my daughter, I have one daughter. She's 31. Her name is Sarah. She works at the Shaver Road Meyer and she's been there for 10 or 15 years. And I've divorced in 2007, and I reconnected with a female that I dated back in college 38 years later.
Wow.
And yeah, so she's lives in Madison, and we did a long distance relationship for a couple of years, and decided that this needed to be more of a day-to-day thing to see if it was real.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the one that made the move because it was a little. And I'm originally from that area.
Right.
So Spring Green, I mentioned, is 40 miles west of Madison. So I have a lot of family in the Madison area, relatives, and a lot of friends from high school and college.
Sure.
So it wasn't as difficult to transition as it might seem at 61 years old.
Yep.
That's a difficult transition still. And I'm kind of shy, so.
I bet.
Right. So going out and meeting new people is a challenge for me.
Let me before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Let me circle back to a couple of things. How, when you left, and these are things that I still remember. I have a
Right.
weird memory about certain things and not so much about other things. I can remember stupid ass stuff from 30 years ago.
Right.
But important things I can't remember. I don't know if you're the same way, but
Yeah.
I remember this. I was on the morning show. No, I was not. I was morning show at 107 when you left, or either you were leaving sales.
Yes, that's correct.
Or
1993.
something like that. I remember a meeting that you had with the boss in his office that lasted all day.
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
I do. Exactly.
What was that? Was that I'm leaving? No, you're not. What was that meeting?
Yeah,
Because
I was-
all day we were going, Jesus Christ, what is he doing in there?
Well, I told him I was leaving to go work at Adams Outdoor,
Ah,
and he did not want me to leave.
right. You were probably doing well.
I was. At
Yeah.
that point, it was just really gaining momentum
Right.
with, the
The
sales
station was doing well.
Yeah.
It had finally,
Yeah, it was a good vehicle.
You know, it takes a
Good
couple of
product,
years.
Great product.
yeah,
Great product. And, at that point, it was 4 years into its infancy and
Right.
growth.
Yeah.
And so there was
But-
still a lot of momentum.
So why did you want to leave them?
Again, it was an opportunity. I knew some people at Adams Outdoor.
Right.
I knew what they were doing, how well they were doing financially from the sales standpoint.
So you probably could make more money over there.
Yes,
basically.
that's really what
Yeah.
motivated me. And again,
You're not alone.
I'm still looking for new opportunities
Sure.
in the voiceover business.
Sure.
So it was just a growth thing, and selfishly I wanted to make more money, I guess. And who doesn't want to do that?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. And so he was trying to keep you
Yeah, that's
All
what that
day.
meeting was all about.
all day. It was an all-day meeting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if it was the Adams Out. No, I was
Or you were going to
I
another
was
station.
going to another radio station.
That's what it was. I
It
just
was,
remember.
yeah. And that was the all-day meeting.
Ah.
The second time,
Yes.
and I decided to stay. And I had to call the other radio station
And say,
tell
"Sorry."
them I'm not coming to work.
Had you
for
had you signed anything?
No, back then you didn't have to sign
Okay,
anything.
I wasn't sure.
Right.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad
That's
you brought
why
that
he
up.
was pissed, because you were going to another station and he didn't want that to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
Well,
another
first of all,
radio
he didn't want to lose a good sales guy.
Right.
Secondly, he didn't want one of his guys going to another station.
Well, sure.
You know.
Yeah, and there was no non-competes or anything like that like
Right.
there are now.
Right.
Back then.
So he talked you into staying.
Yeah, he talked me into staying, and I stayed. That was when I made the transition from on the air to sales. That was during that
Oh.
period where I was already set
To go
to go to this other station.
to do sales.
And Ed,
Said no.
no, we want you here. So I had to call the other station, tell them,
Yikes.
sorry, but I'm not coming, and
Oh,
man. that didn't go over well.
No kidding.
And but hindsight, it was a great, my
Yeah.
start in sales at RKR was the greatest experience in terms
Sure.
of the training I got
Yep.
and the product
Yep.
and my continued knowledge gained of how to deal with people and
Mm-hmm.
clients and and psychology. I think sales is the greatest profession, having come from that for a number of years. And you don't need a business background to be in sales. If you have a liberal arts where you study a lot of psychology and people and how to read people, that's what's really key, I believe.
Sure.
In life, in success in life, but also in any business. And as I always say, people buy from the individual. They don't buy from the company or that product.
Relationships.
They may need it, but there might be other choices, which in radio there certainly are.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Yeah. I mean, you spend a long time in sales cultivating relationships for that reason. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I agree with you. Sales is something else. I don't think I could have done it, and knowing my personality, because I watched you sales guys, and it's like, I don't know how you're doing this shit, but if I went into a meeting and I said, listen, we want you to buy these spots, here's what you're going to get, and they're like, that's a lot of money, I'd be like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it day after day.
Well,
beating the streets.
It was a learning process for me too,
but it was an exciting time too.
Yeah. Again, I look back on that experience and my ability to sell my skills now to people who want to hire me.
Sure.
It's more than just the voice. Mainly, it's the voice. They hear it because it's likely you're never going to meet that person face to face.
Yeah.
There may be a phone conversation, but rarely, as you know. But again, the way you handle that client through the way you do your work and the communication, email, keeping them up to speed on things, is still a big part of it, because you want repeat business.
Right.
In sales.
Yep.
If you're a retailer, you want to treat the customer right. And I get that now. I get it.
Yeah.
I got it a long time ago, but I get it even more now. So, I'm thrilled that I'm able to draw on all of my past experiences to do what I do. And I love what I do, doing voiceover work. And I want to do it for as long as I can.
Yeah.
Because you and me both have a face for radio.
Yeah. I mean,
so nobody has to see me.
Nope.
They just hear my voice, and if I do a good job for them, they'll continue to hire me. And
there you go. And you can do this job for as long as you're alive.
As long as I can see, and as long as I can talk, right?
There you go.
Right.
I mean, that'll work.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're getting ready to wrap up here.
Yeah.
And before we do, a couple of personal things. For those who don't know, Jerry and I, our paths crossed 88, 89, 90.
Right.
When he was the morning guy at 107, came in, started the station in October of 88. I was hired as a part-timer for that radio station. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me. Yeah. I will tell you.
Right.
Even though I'm mad at him now and I hate him because they stuck a knife in my back in 2005. Happens.
Everybody's got a story like that.
That's right. Jerry was the morning guy. I eventually became the overnight guy. The dominoes fall in radio. Somebody leaves, another person moves up.
Right.
So I would be there from midnight, 11. It was 11 to 6.
Wow, I didn't
remember that. 11 to 6.
By yourself.
By myself in the building.
Nobody else in the building.
Every once in a while, somebody bang on the window. Scare the shit out of me. Hey, can you play Skinner? Anyway, so Jerry would come in. Jerry would come in, and I would have a pot of coffee ready, I think.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know how to make coffee because I didn't drink it.
Yeah.
And in the winter, I would go out and shovel the front sidewalk so that people would come in the morning and not have to trudge through snow. That was the overnight guy. That was me doing that.
Right.
And that was like a year.
You did what you had to do.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
So that was a year that I did overnights.
Yeah.
You then left.
Uh-huh.
The new guys brought in, whose name I don't say.
Okay.
You said to me, I know, that's how.
How long has it been?
Someday
13 years?
I'll tell you the whole story over a beer again someday. Anyway, you, on your way out, leaving the morning show, said to me, you won't remember this.
No.
You said to me, so they're going to need a morning person. You should go for that. You should put in for that.
I did tell you that. Huh?
And I went, because I wasn't ready to do a morning show by myself.
You didn't think so?
No, I wasn't. Yeah. But I appreciated it.
Okay.
So that was nice of
me. I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And I thought, maybe I could. No, I suck.
Probably because I said that to every jock on the station.
Hey, you should put in for that. And the truth comes out.
I'm pretty sure I didn't.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
you
for the time.
Talking about the past. And
Yeah.
It's exciting to talk about where we're at right now.
Sure. Full circle.
Once it gets in your blood,
Sure.
it's something that
Well,
you like to do.
You started it because, you came full circle, and now you're doing voiceover work, which is close to radio work.
Yeah.
I started it in 2012 looking ahead, thinking at some point I'm going to get fired again.
Yeah.
Whether it's the station stops, somebody sells the station, I get fired because I say something stupid.
Something out of your control sometimes.
Yeah. And, I wanted to look to the future, and that's why I started it. So we both kind of started at the same time.
Yeah. You control your own destiny in the voiceover world
Yeah.
as a contractor.
That's right. And you get out of it what you put into it, like a lot of other things.
Right.
You can sit on your ass and do nothing,
Yeah.
or you can bust a hump, market yourself, and make it happen.
And as we know, even in today's environment, and probably even more, we know people who have been in business or jobs for 20 plus years, and one day they walk in and they say, we don't need you anymore.
There you go.
And that's totally out of your control. And that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people, not only doing voiceover on the internet, but a lot of people are doing so many things and making money at it on the internet.
Yeah.
By using the internet and digital technology.
Oh, absolutely.
YouTube. When I got into this, that opened my eyes up to just so many other things and people doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. All right. Well, thank you for the time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You
It's been
bet.
great.
I'm glad that some folks who listen to you on the radio got to hear you again. 80s and early 90s was a very exciting time.
Yeah.
In radio.
Never forget it.
Yeah.
Never forget it.
Very fun.
Great.
Jerry Lord, former morning radio voice in Kalamazoo back in the 80s and 90s. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for listening. We will catch you next time on Kalamazoo's podcast.